Good morning, class. Today we're going to be looking at 5.1, the nth roots. Mostly we use square roots and cube roots, but now we're going to learn how to use nth roots, n meaning pretty much any number. Now, one thing to keep in mind, chapter 5 is probably the trickiest chapter in the book. You'll see why later on. You really need to understand how this works. It's very simple. 5.1 is incredibly easy. It's going to be a very, very short class. But you have to practice and get used to it because chapter 5 will get difficult. And when we get back, you can expect multiple tests from chapter 5. So first of all, when we say square root, let's say, for example, square root of 16, that equals positive negative 4. Why? You have to find the number that when you multiply by itself, you end up with 16. And remember, when we don't see a number up here, that means there's a 2 there you can't see. Now, what we're going to do today is learn how to convert radicals and square roots into fractional exponents. It is quite simple. Now, let's take this basic formula into account first. A is your number, n is the power of your root, and m is an exponent that covers or, includes everything inside the radical. So for example, if I want to turn square root or square root of 16 into this type of expression, a rational exponent, I would put my 16, the root becomes the denominator. And since I don't see anything elevating my 16 to a particular power, that means there's a 1 there. So 16 elevated to the exponent of 1/2 is the exact same thing as square root of 16. Let's say I have 10th root of 100. That is the exact same thing as 100 elevated to the 1/10. Again, the power of the root becomes the denominator, and if there's an exponent raising everything, it becomes the numerator. Since there isn't anything on the outside, that means there's a 1. Now let's look at an example of what happens when there is a power on the outside. Let's say I have 3rd root of 7 elevated to the power 2. That is the exact same thing as the number 7. The root becomes the denominator 3, and the power becomes the numerator 2. This is the exact same thing as this. Number, you can think about it this way. The number that is slightly on top stays at the top. The number that is slightly in the bottom stays at the bottom. The only tricky thing is that sometimes when there isn't an exponent, people forget what to do. It's just a 1. Now let's look at the reverse. Let's convert a fractional exponent. Actually, let's go ahead and solve this one. So again, without a calculator, they tell you 16 to the 3/2. Oh my God, I really don't know from the top of my head. But let's do it this way. Square root, again, there's a 2 there. You don't have to put of 16 elevated to the 3rd power. We know that the square root of 16 is positive negative 4 to the 3rd power. 4 times 4 is 16 times 4 is 64. The answers would be positive negative 64. So it is somewhat simpler than it seems. Even though these are fractional exponents, you'll see that they're not really dealt with. Mostly we'll be multiplying them and raising them to powers. We're going to talk about how that works now. And again, this is Algebra 1, but a small review. If you're multiplying variables of the same base, again, when you multiply, all you have to do is add the exponents. You do not multiply the exponents, you add them. So when we multiply variables of the same base, we add our exponents. Now, when we're raising a variable with an exponent to another power, here you do multiply 4 times 2, and that equals 8. And let's see if it's true. A4 squared is the same thing as A4 times A4. And did we not just say that when we multiply variables of the same base, we add the exponents? So when I add the exponents, I end up with a to the 8th power. So again, remember, when we multiply variables, we add the exponents. When we raise a variable with an exponent to another power, we multiply the exponents. Now let's solve an expression. And again, these are quite simple. Let's go over page 240. Let's go over example 4. Let's do A. You tell me 4x to the 5th equals 128. Again, remember, when we're isolating, you have to try to leave the variable with the power till the very end, or the expression to the power to the very end. So the first thing I do here is divide by 4. You do not take the 5th root, you divide by 4 first. So that leaves me with a to the 6th power equals 32. Now I do 5th root, this cancels this, and the 5th root of 32 is 2. That's pretty much it. Remember, odds do not have positive, negative answers. They just have one answer. That's why it's 2. Let's look at the other example. Example B. In example B, we have x minus 3 to the 4th power equals 21. Again, since I cannot take this negative 3 out because it's inside the term with the 4th power, I'm going to do 4th root, and you can just put a 4 here. X minus 3 equals 4th root of 21. This cancels this. I'm left with x minus 3 equals 4th root of 21. Send the 3 to the right, and I have 3 plus minus 4th root of 21. That's pretty much it. The important part of today's chapter is actually understanding how to convert radicals to fractional or rational exponents, and vice versa. So make sure you practice that a bit. And that's it for today's class. So for the homework, you're going to do 21 through 24, which is matching the same expression in radical and rational exponent form. You're going to have to match them. 35 to 40 is solving these types of operations, and 31 to 32 is actually properly using the calculator. Make sure you know how to use the calculator. Some of the tests will be with a calculator. Some of the tests will be with no calculator. So make sure you practice your roots, your basic roots. Okay, I'm not going to give you weird numbers like 117, but you should know the square root of 9, square root of 100, cube root of 27, numbers like that are basic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5s. I'm not going to get too high. And that's pretty much it. Let me see. Yeah, let's leave it like that. Just make sure you practice converting. Tomorrow we're gonna have more exercises with converting. And also on the side note, today I will be uploading your last grade, which has to do with last week's homeworks. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It's gonna be a 0.5 summative. It's gonna replace the notebook grade, which we were unable to upload this quarter. All grades from this week on are for the 4th quarter. Make sure you start accumulating those grades. Do not miss attendance. Do not miss your homework. You will need the grades, believe me, because it does get harder. Take care. Have a great day.